Thank you very much, John. And it's a real pleasure to be here. And during these challenging times, all of us are facing existential threats at all levels, from the individual, through the familial, to the national, to the species level. And this affects our schools of public health as well. So this might be an opportunity for all of us to consider the crisis that we are experiencing as an invitation to wonder, to question the very existence of our schools. And this is why I would like to pose this question. If faculties or if schools of public health disappeared, would anyone notice? And I would like to bring up two very difficult situations that provided many valuable insights during the 20th century about how to face existential threats. One was the Mann Gulch disaster in the US in 1949. This was a massive forest fire. Fire crews were called into the site and most of the firemen died. Something similar, sadly, happened in 1994 during the Storm King mountain fire in the US as well. And when what happened was analyzed, there was a common element. Basically, the firemen who survived were the ones who dropped their tools. Okay? They were able to escape because they dropped their axes, their tanks, whatever was holding them back, and they managed to escape when they knew that it was impossible to contain the fires. The message from these disasters is that when under threat, we must drop our tools. Okay? So that may be one of the issues that the current pandemic is inviting us to consider. What tools should we drop? Which tools should we keep? Which new tools should we gain to thrive? And there are many threats for us as schools of public health. There are clinical threats, of course. There are financial threats. There are political threats, and all of them are feeding massive social threats, which could affect in substantive ways our very existence as schools. So what has been clear, and Walter hinted at this, is that once again, in the public's eye, medicine, the clinical sides of the pandemic have taken the attention of the public. Conversations about whether there are enough ventilators or intensive care beds have basically eclipsed many of the messages that should be coming from the schools of public health. And this is also manifested through what's happening in the virtual world. I used a code on Google to force the search engine to provide articles that included in the title School of Public Health and COVID simultaneously. And just 69 articles were identified as available in the cybersphere. Only 69 articles apparently were produced up to May the 31st, with the term School of Public Health and COVID. And this is a reflection of how much our work is featured by others during this massive crisis. And the situation is equally dramatic in some of the other main languages. There were only 8 articles in Spanish, 6 in French, and none in German and Italian. And this should be, I think, another source of concern for us. What is happening? Why is there so little out there in terms of our presence during the crisis? And it's not to say that public health has not had relevance. Okay? This is specifically focused on schools of public health. Okay? And there are, of course, millions upon millions of articles talking about public health and COVID. But when the focus is specifically placed on schools of public health, the picture is quite gloomy. Walter was also mentioning that the time has come for us to speak truth to power, and I think schools of public health have been missing a massive opportunity to be front and center during the pandemic. We have been missing in action, and even if we have had a private presence, I think this has been a tremendous opportunity for us to showcase what we have to offer society at large, and to provide a counterbalancing effect to the role that politicians and leaders of the financial and corporate sector are playing in terms of forcing decisions as to how to relax our measures of containment or mitigation, or of reducing the impact of the lockdown on the economy. So who should notice if schools of public health in Europe disappeared? And this is a question that applies to us in Canada or in the US or anywhere else in the world. Who should notice? Okay? And I would like to pause just for a few seconds to invite us to think about this. Okay? Who should notice if we disappeared? So I went to ASPHER's site, and specifically to the objective that focuses on the support from the association to the schools of public health. And this is the statement there. So this statement I consider as the source of answers for this question. So who would notice if we disappeared in terms of our educational, our training, our scientific research, or our service to society? We are now having to use virtual tools, for example. There have been huge criticisms to the way in which universities at large are responding to the pressures to shift into a virtual environment. This is affecting us as well. And what the pandemic is doing is to expose how irrelevant a lot of the materials, a lot of the programs that we have to offer our students and other people who come to universities at large for enlightenment, for opportunities to learn about how to develop their critical thinking skills, to figure out how to thrive in life. This crisis, these virtual teaching experiences are underwhelming in general, because we seem to believe that all we need to do is to transfer what we would offer in a traditional classroom environment into a virtual platform, and the content is not, and our way to deliver knowledge. These traditional approaches are really leaving our learners dissatisfied. So we have a great opportunity to retool. And I would like to invite us to consider two questions. The first one is, what if we became leaders in online learning? One of the advantages we have in public health is that we don't require very complex infrastructure to engage our learners. So what if we decided to leapfrog and to make it a priority for us to be at the leading edge of virtual education? How would we look like? What tools would we need to drop, and what new tools should we acquire to do it? What is preventing us from asking this question to ourselves? And what if we made education and training of public influencers a top priority? What if we made it explicit that we are the best companions, the best accomplices, the best partners for those who are having to make very, very hard decisions on a daily basis in terms of public health issues? What would it take for us to be the first place that people can think about when needing information on how to make decisions when facing public health crisis? So this could give us an opportunity to bring back the public into public health. If we look at research, our journals would need to reinvent themselves or disappear. What you see on the screen is a graph of the number of citations that our articles in the top public health journals are getting over a period of 4 years. And the curve that's going up is the top clinical counterpart, the Cancer Journal for Clinicians. And so I think this image speaks by itself. We are practically irrelevant, we are non-existent, and we are unnoticeable. Most of what we are publishing is appearing in journals other than the ones that include public health in their title. Why is this? What should we do? Should they disappear, or should we reinvent our publications? I think this might be a very interesting subject for discussion throughout this event and future events. The public is expecting us to pay attention to key issues, and it's surprising that we don't have answers for questions as big as this one, and at the same time as relatively simple to be answered. We have had other pandemics, we have faced other coronaviruses. Why is it that we don't know whether masks protect people and what types of masks to wear and where and when? I think this is rather embarrassing for us. What has happened to us? There will be big decisions to be made in terms of access to vaccines if we get one or many available, and not only for COVID-19, but for many others. So who should get the vaccines first? How do we make decisions about this? Would we be absent by the time these decisions become top of mind for people? How should businesses reopen? How should we transition from the lockdown? What is the stance of schools of public health, and who would care if we had one collectively created? What is the safest distance that we should have from each other within what now we call physical or social distancing? When trying to get guidance on these important issues. If we look at vaccines, the situation is relatively green too. Even though there are many efforts around the world being made right now to come up with one, the lead is being taken by the corporate sector. Working with groups of public health leaders, of course, but without an explicit presence of schools of public health. And so what role should we be playing here? Is there any role left for us? Is there any time left during this period in which the window of opportunity, again, is narrowing for us to be relevant? What if we decide to press the pause button a bit on us and to be urgently patient and ask even bigger questions like this? What if we focused on the ultimate goal of public health? And by the way, what is the ultimate goal of public health? I would like to propose that we would consider ourselves successful when everybody could experience good health. Okay? So what if one of the opportunities that we seize as schools of public health is to unleash a pandemic of health? What if we use all the energy that is being generated by the COVID-19 pandemic to understand that ideas, emotions, and behaviors are also contagious, and that health might already be pandemic? Over the last decade, with a team of international colleagues, we have been gathering data on self-reported health now from more than 2 million people from 122 different countries. And the figures indicate that close to 3/4 of humanity already considered ourselves to be healthy. This is one of the most pandemic situations we have ever encountered. So we already have 3/4 of the job done. What would it take for us to refocus on health and to ensure that every person anywhere in the world could experience good health? And in 2011, a collaborative group that was led from the Netherlands in Europe promoted a new concept of health that positions health as an ability, the ability to adapt and to manage the inevitable physical, mental, and social challenges that we face throughout our lives. So it's possible to be healthy even in the presence of diseases. So what would it take us to experience good health even when we are facing a pandemic of an infectious entity? What if we focused on what has been called the eco pandemics? There are other waves, other tsunamis that are hitting us right now and that are going to become even stronger in the very short term. One of them is an eco pandemic of mental illness. And this is very serious because even before we went into this critical period, depression alone was the main cause of disability in the world. Now, when we have so many people unemployed, businesses going bankrupt, people shifting their work to their homes, we are seeing a rapid escalation of anxiety, of stress, of burnout that would have very serious consequences in our societies. And these are public health challenges. So what if we made an explicit effort to make mental health issues a top priority for us? The consequences of unemployment, the huge gaps in society that are being exposed by the pandemic of COVID-19 and the violence that is increasing throughout the world, and violence of different types. I think this is a time for us to say, here we are as schools of public health, this is important to us, and we are going to lead efforts at the species level to ensure that these eco-pandemics don't contribute to our extinction. What if we used this crisis to flip another picture? We traditionally, in schools of public health, tend to exclude the private sector. We tend to consider major corporations as foes. And we are very reluctant to engage in collaborative activities with groups that we consider to be working against our interests. In many cases, we consider as the weak partners, even if we go into joint efforts with the private sector. Well, now the private sector is facing one of the biggest crises ever. So we might have a great opportunity to come forward and to say, here we are, you are facing big challenges, we can provide a lot of value and reinvent the way in which we collaborate. There may be a great opportunity to develop a new language of partnership between academia and the private sector, especially between schools of public health and corporations at this time of crisis. Is there a convening opportunity for us as schools of public health in Europe now? The pandemic has exposed huge barriers for collaboration. And there have been growing calls for Europe to develop a stronger health citizenship and to think seriously about the creation of a highly functional and a very strong European health authority. There have been calls from organizations like Doctors Without Borders, for example, to strengthen the ECDC. And the differences that the pandemic has exposed and the difficulties to act at the continental level, I think are pregnant with a huge opportunity for schools of public health to act as a neutral ground, as the ideal host for conversations about how to collaborate with the intensity and effectiveness that are required during these times, and especially during this pandemic. But it's down to us to say, sure, this is an important role for us to play. Okay? And my question is, what's preventing us from doing it? So, which tools should we drop? Which tools should we adopt? What is the opportunity that is inherent to the current crisis for us to reimagine ourselves, to reinvent our role, and to engage with every group that could benefit from what we have to offer during this historic time? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. Some very stimulating questions there for us all. Now, I forgot to say that we are fielding questions through social media, through the ASFA office Twitter account. And if you've got questions and want to put them forward that way, please do. In the meantime, until we get some questions showing in the chat Zoom box, I'm going to invite Walter for some immediate responses and comments on what you've just heard there, Walter.
Thank you, Alex. This was very inspiring and provocative. But I'm going to ask you a direct question. Do you have a specific idea of the tools that we would drop and the tools that we have to adopt? Essentially, I take your proposal of focusing on the leadership, focusing on trying to develop online the skills, to develop a kind of coalition of public health leadership all around the world, because I'm sure that there are leaders in the public health community, but maybe they are not able to speak up, they are somehow in difficult positions. Do you have a specific idea on how we can manage this?
Yeah, I think this is the time for us to be more assertive. I'm going to be, it may sound a little brutal or unfair, but I think, and by the way, I'm a physician and one of my areas is palliative care. And we live something very similar within palliative care. Okay, in a way, we feel like second-class citizens or third-class citizens in clinical medicine. The super specialists and the ones who are trying to save lives and all that usually tend to get most of the visibility and most of the credit and most of the social value. With public health, I think we are experiencing something similar. Our faculties of medicine or schools of medicine tend to be the dominant forces. And in a way, we try to compensate for this situation by trying to become like them. I think we have an opportunity to be ourselves and to develop our own identity and a space that we could consider our own, and to use that level of self-confidence, new level of self-confidence, to be much more visible and to project our value to society. I think we are, for example, playing silly games with citation impact factors, and we are trying our publications to be as visible and cited as our clinical counterparts. What we are seeing in terms of our own journals, I think, is clear evidence that it would be very hard for us to do it. We are obsessed with becoming very strong using traditional research approaches and to be valued in that sense. And I think we are, and this is a problem for universities at large, by the way. We have ceased to be places of learning, of enlightenment, of enablement, of social transformation. And we have become temples for research, which is important, but it should probably not be the main driving force for us. We should be very good at doing research, but research shouldn't be the main focus of our institutions. We have become very boring. We have become very disconnected from what next generations or new generations require. We could retool ourselves very easily by engaging our own students as our mentors and to enable us to reimagine and to reinvent how we manage knowledge and how we make it relevant for them and for society at large. And I think we should be playing a much more active role in terms of our service to society, what we tend to call creative academic activities that are almost like marginal efforts. I think that our members who are doing things that could be considered as drawing outside the lines, the troublemakers, the rebels that we have within most of our schools, should be celebrated and should be put on positions of leadership and with resources to push us into this new century and in the direction that the public deserves and expects and needs from us.
Great, thank you. We haven't had any questions through our social media route yet. I'm going to say a couple of things. Hopefully not in the defensive mode of a school of public health, outraged at what you're telling us about the pointless outputs of journal citations and what have you. There's another interpretation of the fireman research, the fireman studies, that the ones who dropped their tools and ran away, should we be in that category? But at the same time, I think some of what you're describing strikes very much to my heart in terms of the tools we don't lose are our values. We very often, in my lifetime, I've seen us move into technological public health. How good is your epidemiology? How knowledgeable are you on that study of disease in populations? But why are you studying it? What are you using it for? If it doesn't make a difference in terms of lives saved or quality of life or disability prevented, or even in palliative care terms, a good death, you know, a satisfying role in society. So I think the idea of, I always like to put into mission statements around education for health, that we're doing it with a view to protecting and improving the health of the people we serve. The other thing I wonder about, though, is you're describing certainly a social movement, but it could also be said you're describing heroic public health, that actually we do need people who can grind big numbers and that they can be the engine of public health in our schools. And that heroic public health, how often does it come from schools? Did Florence Nightingale go to a school of public health, or Joseph Goldberger or Che Guevara? You know, I think you might be describing a particular brand of public health.
Well, John, let me go back to your first comment. The firemen, because they were men who survived, realized that their situation was hopeless and that the fire could not be controlled by them. And this notion of dropping the tools allowed them to survive and also to share with us insights as to what happened. And one of them decided to create a fire himself, and which now are called the backfires. Okay, so he burned the area, okay, that separated him from the big bushfire, and that allowed the window of opportunity for him to escape to widen and to survive. And now the whole approach to big bushfires includes controlled burnings as one approach to protecting the environment and cities, etc. Now, as I showed in the last image, we are using airplanes with the capacity to drop anti-flame materials, and we are not dropping firemen onto the fires directly to extinguish them. So in a way, the entire field was transformed by these people and their insights. So perhaps there are two questions that complement the one I formulated at the beginning that could go for the second set of comments you made about our epidemiology and our traditional roles and what we should protect. And one of them is, what should we protect at all costs in schools of public health? Okay? No matter what should they retain and what should we nurture and strengthen, regardless of the circumstances in which we find ourselves? Okay, that's one. Another one is, let's imagine, this is a thought experiment. Let's imagine that schools of public health don't exist and that we are invited to create them, de novo. Okay. How would schools of public health look like if we had the opportunity to invent them? Okay. And perhaps these three questions, if we disappeared now, who would notice? Who should notice? What should we protect at all costs? And if we had the opportunity to invent them, how would they look like? Okay, might enrich the conversations that I think we should be having. And then in terms of the heroics, I think there is room for the whole spectrum. We should probably protect our curiosity-driven research, okay? And research that may not have any direct or short-term value, okay? At least noticeable value. Okay? But we also should nurture those who are pushing the boundaries and not punish them, because what we are doing in most cases now is suppress our colleagues who are trying to do things differently because they are not conforming. So we are in a way suffocating the potential heroes, and they would otherwise continue to flourish elsewhere when we should be their nurturing grounds for them. And I think our young people, the future, our young people, our young faculty members, our students should be our main source of inspiration and leaders of youth groups in society that we have tended to exclude. Okay, we tend to consider our children, our adolescents, our young adults from other sectors of society as adults in development that we are not engaging in the development of our own schools. So I think we have an opportunity to engage youth in many different ways. And I'm talking about not only young people, I want to extend this to youthful people, okay? Because there is this notion of being young and to be youthful regardless of your chronological age. There are lots of old professors who are younger in spirit than many young students, okay? And that youthfulness is perhaps what we should be focusing more on, and to try to blend it with the wisdom that is available in abundance in our schools, not only from old folks, but from young in age people as well. This is the time for wisdom in a nutshell.
Thank you. We do have a question from Rostislav Kostadinov in Plovdiv, who would like to ask what do you suggest if the results of our research is quite different to what clinical doctors are advertising?
Well, again, I think I'm going to zone in the word wisdom. Okay? Wisdom as an ability, not wisdom as a state. And wisdom as the ability to know what a good life is and to make every possible effort to enjoy it given our circumstances and enable other people to do the same. So, and wisdom as the antidote to human stupidity, which seems to be the driving force now. Okay, our propensity to self-destruct is more apparent now than ever before. Self-sabotage may be the only human, uniquely human trait. So this is manifesting also through our confrontation with our clinical colleagues in every domain, not only on the field, okay, out there, but also in our academic circles. Okay? So if there is discrepancy, if there is contradiction in the findings of the research coming from clinical groups and from public health groups, what if we, schools of public health, again, stepped up to the plate and said, we would like to be the neutral ground in which these controversies could be resolved, and there are methodologies to deal with discordant research. And then we bring scholarship to the table in a way that would be inviting, okay, rather than threatening to those who are engaged in those arguments. And that would be probably one of our biggest contributions to a good life, which is what many of the philosophers, especially after Socrates, suggested that should be our main goal. And I would like to extend that to our schools of public health, is the contribution to a good life within which good health should be an important component.
Okay, thank you for that. We do need to wind up now. I'm just going to invite Walter to make any final comments, and then I'll just round us off, and then we need to go on to our next session at 1 o'clock, so 2 o'clock, so wherever you are in the world. Walter.
I think we have to take seriously Alex's proposals. And now starting point for the future of public health, and we have to study as education, as educator, mechanics of implementation. You know, we have to understand what are the tools to be dropped, what are the tools to be adopted, and what is the strategy and the tactics to go there. I think it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that we can tackle. So thank you very much for this, and best wishes for all.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to spend this time together.
Great. And my thanks to Alex. You've certainly given us some very serious food for thought. I think the idea of testing and challenging ourselves is always really important. It's very easy to think you're doing a good job, but you do need to test yourself against what the actual outcomes are of what we do. And if it doesn't improve the health of the people we serve, then why are we doing it? And I think that challenge of a good life and a contribution to good life is something very important for us to reflect on as well. By way of leaving our audience thinking this way, I'll just try to remind them of your three big questions. What do we need to protect at all costs? What would we be missed? What would be missed if we weren't here? And what are we doing to push the boundaries and not punish the people who are trying to do that? So I'm sure I missed another one, but thank you very much for that. And we wish you every success in your continued philosophy and public health advocacy in Canada and Colombia. And thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you, Walter, and thank you to our video presenters earlier today as well. Thank you.